All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the IC Realtime webinar series. This is Patrick. I am the technical trainer here at IC Realtime, and welcome. Welcome again to the IC Realtime webinar training. This is part of a series we do every Wednesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern and 4 o'clock Eastern. If you have any colleagues you think would want to benefit a little bit from learning about connectivity, please have them join us at the 4 p.m. Eastern Time class today. Next week, we've got some really good classes coming up. On Wednesday, we'll be talking about understanding 360 cameras. And on Friday, we'll be talking about IC My Cloud, which is a pretty cool solution. So mark your calendars now. Join us Wednesday and Friday of next week as well. So today, we're going to talk about connectivity. This was actually part 2 of our webinar that we did on Wednesday regarding networking. We talked about how to set your network up or set your recorder up on the network. We talked about how to view your recorder from the outside doing port forwarding, and that was a pretty awesome class. Now we're going to talk about what to do to fine-tune the actual connectivity. A lot of times you're going to be in scenarios where you're going to have limited internet access, or maybe you're on a different type of slow internet access, something like a satellite system or maybe a 3G, 4G system. This is important that you know how to manipulate your recorder to really make the most out of those situations. Remember, when the internet service provider is selling your client on their services, what they're selling them on is upload speed. That's you sitting in your living room streaming movies or surfing the web. That's you from the inside going out to the world. That is your download stream. What we're concerned with is your upload stream. Remember, there's a large portion of clients, including yours, who are going to want to see their recorder from the outside. They're going to want to be in a coffee shop in Milan and be able to see their cameras back here in Florida, or they're going to want to be in the office looking at their home or vice versa. So it's important that you know what the upload speed is on that particular circuit. Your client may brag to you and boast to you, well, I've got a 5 meg circuit, I'm good to go. Well, a 5 meg download circuit really equates to almost a 2 meg upload circuit. Traditionally, upload is about half to really a third of what your download speed is. So what we're concerned again is upload speed. That natively is going to be a lot lower than your download speed, and we're going to talk about some ways that you can really maximize that connection. So what happens if you don't maximize it? Say, for example, you have a 3 meg DSL line, which we now know is a 1 meg upload, and your client is trying to view their cameras remotely. They open up camera number 1, it opens up, it looks great on their phone app, everything is looking good. They open camera 2, things start getting a little sluggish, but it eventually loads up. They get to camera 3 and it doesn't open at all. That's because you're trying to stream up these video streams coming from the cameras, and it's just allowing enough bandwidth for maybe 2 cameras to go through. So what we can do to combat that is something very unique with IC Realtime. We have an encode setting that actually has a mainstream and a substream, and we're going to jump into that right now. Go here. Actually, I can minimize this, and it should be there. There we go. So I'm actually logged into one of my NVRs here on the local network. I'm able to modify my mainstream as well as my substream right through encode settings. And this is available on any of our recorders. So if you have an analog recorder, you can do this. If you have an AVS recorder, you're not going to have any problem with your encoding. And ironically, at the IP cameras themselves, they also have 2 streams of video coming out of them. So let's talk first about the mainstream. Mainstream, which is this one here, is actually what records to your hard drive. So when you're making your settings, you want to calculate your storage, how much room you're going to have. This is where you can actually go in and kind of adjust it and make it a little better, give you a little more hard drive space. So this particular camera that we're looking at is presently set to 264H. It's set to 1080p at 30 frames with a constant bit rate of about 6 megs. Now this particular unit happens to have 128 cameras on it. This is just one of them. But you're seeing on the mainstream, we're recording a very high resolution at 1080p. We're recording an awful lot of frames at 30, and our bit rate, which is the amount of data that's being used by that particular camera, is topping out at 6 megs, which is really taxing my network if I don't already have a gigabit network card or a gigabit switch on the network. So let's talk first about resolution. Now there are different types of resolution. Obviously, if you're in an analog world, you're looking at CIF and D1 as your resolution. When you get into IP and AVS, you're talking about 720p, 1080p, and even 4K. which is referred to as ultra high definition. That runs at about 8 megapixels. So know that your resolution you can modify quite a bit. I like to use the philosophy of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If your end user loves 720p and they look at it and go, wow, this is amazing, keep it there. You're going to save a lot of resources. You're going to save a lot of space. If your client's looking at 1080p and that's acceptable for them, then go ahead and fine tune. Another really cool thing about the resolution setting is that I can make it unique on each camera. You'll notice that each camera has its own individual encode setting. So this particular unit, I can go all the way down and change my encode on any of the channels that I have cameras on. Let's go ahead and look at frames per second. The frame rate, or the amount of frames per second, is very important when we're talking about calculating our storage capacity, because this really has a huge impact on your hard drive usage. So real time is actually around 15 to 20 frames per second. Life, as you look out the window and see people walking by, they're usually doing between 15 and 20 frames per second. Your television at home is around 15 or 20 frames per second. That's real time. So why do we even go up to 30? Well, think about applications where you have maybe a driveway or a parking lot where cars are racing by a little faster than life moves. Maybe they're going 30 or 35 miles an hour. 30 frames per second is perfect for that. Now, obviously, we don't want to miss anything. We don't want any kind of choppy view where it's kind of robotic looking. So pick your frame rate based on what the camera is actually looking at. Maybe it needs to be at 30 frames. Maybe it doesn't require that much frame rate. You can drop it down to 15 and it's going to look amazing. So this is a good spot to not only manage your bandwidth on your network, but also your storage onto your hard drive itself. The bitrate type comes in two flavors, either CBR for constant bitrate or VBR for variable bitrate. If I set a constant bitrate and I set my bitrate, that's it. That's what it's going to be. This particular channel or this particular camera will go from 1 meg all the way up to 8 megs if I want. I'm somewhere kind of in the middle, upper middle. But that's fine. I can adjust this if I need to. I just hit the little drop down. I can change it to whatever I want it to be, and I can even customize it as well if I want to turn it down. Now, this is going to have a huge impact on your resolution, because if you're looking at a high resolution at a low bit rate, it's going to be very grainy and pixelated. So you may want to do some tweaking and fine tuning on this before you go ahead and go live with the camera system. A variable bit rate is kind of a unique thing. What a variable bit rate will give me the option of is picking my video quality or my image quality, and from that, when there's motion detected, it's going to go to a higher image quality. When there's no motion detected, it's going to drop down to a very, very low image, a very low frame rate. Where this application works the best, to be honest, is in a jewelry store. Maybe you've got a camera over the safe. It's active 2 times a day when they're putting the jewelry in at night and when they're taking it out in the morning. The rest of the time, it's either a locked safe or an empty safe. So variable bit rate would be perfect there, because when there is motion in that area, it's going to jump up to a very high resolution and record at a very high frame rate. If I use this in an area where there's a lot of traffic, I'm really taxing my recorder a lot more than I need to. So probably 99% of the time, you're going to be using constant bit rate, but variable bit rate does come in handy, again, because it does fluctuate back and forth. If you're in an area with very, very low traffic where you want to see a few times a day when it actually spikes up, that'll be just fine. But if you accidentally used variable bit rate in, say, the entrance lobby to a business, it's definitely going to be jumping around quite a bit. So you'll see the impact on your network, you'll see the impact on your storage, and again, a lot of times our technical support guys go in and just change back to constant. The bit rate is, again, the speed that's on the local network. It's the amount of room that it's taking up on the network. You can certainly fine-tune this and tweak it one way or the other. So I have different types of mainstream as well. In fact, this is regular, so if I'm doing regular recording, but if I drop it down, you can see I can change it for motion detection or alarm as well. So maybe I'm using that camera to record only on motion. What I can do is display a much lower resolution image, and when that motion happens, it'll immediately go to a much higher, clearer resolution. Same thing with alarm states. Maybe I've got a camera at the end of a hallway looking down at a door, but during certain hours of the day when the door opens, it breaks a relay or breaks a magnetic contact that triggers the camera to start recording at a much higher resolution. So that can come in very handy if you're doing different types of recording. So here's a pretty standard setting for an IP camera. What I would normally do, again, is bring your frame rate down a little bit. You may even want to bring your bit rate down, say from 6 megs to 4 megs. This is going to look pretty good on one of your 1080p cameras. Now let's go ahead and talk about Substream. Substream is also very important because, again, this is what's streaming out. Hold on a second here. This is what's streaming out to the web. So again, I'm streaming out H.264. I'm streaming out at D1 resolution at a 7 frame per second, which is much, much lower, and at a bit rate of 512. So what's this going to look like for my IP camera is going to be pretty analogish. It's going to come out at a much lower resolution, much lower frame rate, much lower bit rate. So when I open up my iPhone or my iPad, the image I'm going to see isn't going to be nearly as clear as what I would see if I were on the local network, because I'd be looking at 1080p resolution. So the advantage of this is, again, most people are looking at this on their iPhones or their Androids, and it's a little tiny picture to begin with, and when it expands to the size of an iPhone, it's still going to look pretty decent. So what am I looking for? Well, obviously, if I'm looking at it, I'm not necessarily using my phone for constant surveillance as if I were a security guard walking around. I would probably have looking for strange vehicles or my front door being open or my dog running around the front yard, something along that line. But I can see that with no problem on D1. You'll also notice the impact to my network. I'm streaming out at 500K. So really, I'm streaming out at a much, much lower bit rate and also a much, much lower frame per second. So I'm utilizing very little bandwidth. So that with a Substream like this, I could actually stream out all 16 cameras with no problem at all to my phone, to my device when I'm remote, or if I'm logging in from the office, it'll be right here. So it's pretty awesome to have the ability to do mainstream at a much higher resolution versus Substream at a much lower resolution. This is really the key to connectivity, to making sure that you're able to see through and have no problem getting back through that network and seeing it from the outside. Are there any questions? Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's talk about the next part, which is going to be on our phone apps. We have several phone apps available to you, and I really want to explain those to you and what the differences are, because when you are logging in from the outside, you're definitely going to want to use whichever app is most appropriate. So let me go ahead and bring out my website again. And I'm going to go to support and software downloads. And you'll see there's a link to our file here, to our Windows version, and also for our Pro application, which is under Android or iOS, as well as our Smart ICRSS. So there's some really good tools here available for you. Let's pull up the iOS. Now the iOS is going to automatically take you to the Pro page. The ICRSS Pro is our advanced application. It's used primarily for integrators who really want to have functionality like playback, have functionality like e-mapping, where you can superimpose an image onto your iPad. It also works very well with our intercom system. It's what you'll need for push notification. If you want to be notified when someone rings your doorbell, you'll want to use the Pro app. So this is the ICRSS Pro app. This is our high-end app. Obviously, at $29.99, we consider this to be more like an integration app, which really is a lot cheaper than most of the integration apps out there. But it certainly gets the job done for you if you need a lot. You need playback. You want to make sure you can do two-way audio with no problem at all. You want to make sure you can do push notification. All that is available in the Pro app. But we also have a couple other apps. ICView, which we'll open here in a second, is our basic viewing app. And you'll notice this used to be $2.99 and now it is free. So we have a free viewing app if you want to just view your cameras, control your PTZs. ICView is the way to go. So what ICView will bring you is, again, just viewing of multiple recorders. You can log into your IP cameras individually if you want to. It is going to see the Substream coming off of that unit, so you're going to be looking at a lower res version, but it's going to certainly be just fine for you to view and make sure there's not anything going on in your parking lot or ours. The last one I want to talk about is the IC720 app, which if I go back, let me scooch down to it. I think the IC720 app is on the last page. Bear with me here. Nope. Okay, well, let's talk about the IC720 app. It is also free. It is designed as a free app which is really based on our 360 and 720 technology. So our 360 cameras have the ability to see in a fully immersed world. I can take my iPad and turn it around and look up and look down just like I can, you've seen at the shows. With the IC720 app, you're now also able to do the 720 cameras. It gives you that full immersive view, the opportunity to look around the entire image above and below, all on a free app. So what you would do is search for IC720. Just like our IC View app, it is free, and it is geared more towards the 360 and 720 cameras, but it will certainly work with your regular cameras as well. So those are our three apps: the Pro, which is the Pro app, obviously, the View, which is our new free app for viewing and PTZ control, and finally the IC720, which is designed, again, around viewing your 720 and 360 cameras. All right, last but not least, I want to talk about a ICRSS Pro. Here we are. And I want to talk about IC720, and I want to talk about Smart ICRSS. Let me go ahead and open that up for us. Bear with me here one sec. There we go. Now, Smart ICRSS is another remote access tool. It's used when you want to log in from a central location to multiple locations. I can load my Smart ICRSS right from that same spot we went to link out to the websites for the phone apps. With this, I can do multiple cameras, up to 50 recorders simultaneously. I have a grouping of recorders. I can pull images over. I can save them at the end of the day, be able to come back to this. When I reboot my computer, it'll automatically load up those monitors. It is visible on up to 4 monitors, so I can take one monitor and put all my parking lot cameras on it. I can put another one with just cash registers. It gives me a lot of functionality if I'm looking at multiple recorders from either a Windows or a Mac platform. It also gives me playback. I can go in and do playback here from my devices. If I want to do local recording, I can do that as well. I can save those files directly to my computer. And most importantly, I have device setup here, so I can actually go in, add users to my recorders. I can change settings like encode right from the Smart ICRSS tool. So this would be more for, I'm a client who has a chain of hotels. I load this on my PC or my Mac at home, and I'm able to view all of those cameras as well as do playback, as well as configure them remotely. So the Smart ICRSS is a very, very cool app. I definitely recommend you download it if you're looking at your client's recorders, or if your client needs to look at more than one, being a home unit or an office unit. Load Smart ICRSS. It's a very, very cool application, and for CMS software that's free, it really has a lot of cool features. Are there any questions about our phone apps or Smart ICRSS? Cool. Well, I want to thank you guys very much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Again, this is part of a series, and we've got this same webinar at 4 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time, as well as the next week's webinars, which will be Wednesdays and Fridays. If you need to reach out to me, I am Patrick at icrealtime.com. If you want to schedule a webinar for your team, a private webinar, I can certainly help coordinate that as well. And I want to thank you again for your time, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
You got it.
Yep, thanks a lot.
Thank you.